The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
Welcome. And that was about as Tennessee basketball of a thing as Tennessee basketball could possibly ever be. And I've seen, covered, and been around a lot of disappointments. But my, oh my, to get to that point, to kind of be in control of the game, you had a double-digit lead at halftime, and then it just all slipped away. You can't really blame the defense. Florida Atlantic, had they hit more shots in the first half, it would have been a tie ball game or maybe even the lead. And then they hit those shots. Credit them for the extra pass, for tolerating the tough defense. But at the end of the day, Caleb, I mean, Tennessee was what Tennessee was, and that is they struggle on the offensive side. That's just where this team was a month ago, and especially after this Sky Ziegler injury.
Yeah, where is everybody? Everybody came for me when I said Tennessee's defense alone wouldn't win them a championship.
Well, no, you said it wouldn't be enough to get to the Sweet 16. So I'm in the masses here. They made it to the Sweet 16.
They hit the lottery with some matchup advantages. Okay, I just want to point out that in this game, look, Florida Atlantic scored 62 points. Dave, you've covered college basketball longer than I have even. If you're playing a mid-major, you expect to score more than 62 points, right? Am I right? Am I missing that?
I remember doing the math in my head, and it was combined 49 at halftime, and I thought, good gracious, man, we're setting basketball back about 100 years. So, yes, you would think you're watching that other game, that Kansas State Michigan State game, and it's up in the 90s at overtime, and you're thinking this is two totally different sports. This is somewhere closer to when I watched my son play in middle school.
Yes. And can we put to rest? I'm going here now. I'm going here. It's something you said, and I hate to go here. Tennessee could do better than Rick Barnes. I'm saying it.
Okay. Let me play the opposite side, because I tend to agree that. Now, we're talking about a Sweet 16, and I want to clarify some things. I think a Sweet 16 is something to be proud of. I think that when I was saying my son's middle school game, I was joking. Tennessee, they do bring you down into the mud, and that is their game plan. So let's not totally throw that out the window because it got you to.
But great offense always beats great defense, and you know that, Dave.
Okay, so I'm going to play the other side, because the thing, this is what I hate when somebody says that you should replace the coach. I hate when they say, well, who are you going to get? I hate that. I think that's a loser's mentality. So that's like my absolute pet peeve you will find. Nobody knew that Tennessee was going to get Lane Kiffin. You don't know who an athletic director has his eye on. So I will say that I would ask you that question, though, just for the sake of the argument. And I think this is way too early, but for the sake of the argument, do you think Tennessee has enough pull to go get a big name type of coach if they needed to?
I don't know if they have the pull to get the big name type of coach that, like, you would think in your mind, like a Jay Wright or a Brad Stevens or anybody like that. What I think they have is the athletic director who can find the coach that would take Tennessee to the next level. And that's where I'm at. Look, let's call it what it is. Rick Barnes, we're all forgetting this now. And I'm sorry. I know I'm doing a 180 because I was very complimentary for a week, but I'm going to go back to where I was before the tournament started. So I get to do that, by the way, because of what happened tonight. I'm allowed to do that. And I would say that when Dave Hart hired Rick Barnes, it had everything to do with stability for the program after Donnie Tyndall and less to do with actually maybe the potential to win at a high level. And I think that now Tennessee has stabilized. Jeremy Pruitt's gone in football. Donnie Tyndall on basketball. Yeah, you got Tony Vitello rubbing some feathers the wrong way in baseball. But for the most part, I would say that you can shoot a little higher. And I think that the commitment that Rick Barnes has, and we watched it tonight again, to the mid-range, to inefficient shots, all the way around, to the idea that I'm going to let my offense sputter over a course of 10, 12, 15 minutes because I trust my defense.
A long time.
Yeah, which he does. That is a 1980s, 1970s way of thinking in basketball, and he's still committed to that, and it cost him tonight. Look, there's a lot of criticism tonight with the way the refs called the game. Let's call it what it is. FAU worked the refs. Dusty May pulled it off.
Like starting Sunday night.
Yeah, exactly. Starting Sunday night, they worked the refs. We're not going to deny that here. But at the same time, Tennessee should have been good enough to overcome that, and they weren't. And that was solely because of coaching at that point. And I don't think you can get past that.
I think the question we have to ask, and let's get your thoughts on the message board, because we're hearing everything from terrible to trust Danny White. And that's the other thing you have to factor in. So if you got a coach that's knocking at the door, it's kind of like the Mark Richt thing. I think everybody likes Rick Barnes. I think that everybody thinks he's a great guy, but can he take that next step? Well, Georgia would have sat with Richt another year had Kirby Smart not gotten a serious offer from South Carolina, and Georgia freaked. And at the time, I thought it was a terrible hire with Kirby Smart. So there's not the natural that's just sitting out there. Grant Williams, who was in the stands, or Allen Houston, who was in the stands, they're not sitting there with ties to Tennessee basketball like Kirby Smart had to Georgia, and you would have to make that move. I don't know who that guy or that person might even be. I know that Josh Heupel didn't have those ties. You don't have to have those ties. I don't 100% know if Danny White, although I think he is as tied in from a basketball perspective. You can knock Mike Hamilton all you want, but he was really tied in with basketball. And I think that Danny White's proven he's tied in with football. The Heupel hire was a good one. But you are pushing everything in the middle of the table to consider that if you're a Tennessee fan, because you've got a good stable base, like you mentioned, you've got a good guy, and you're making the Sweet 16. That's pushing a lot in the table. I mean, that's pretty analogous almost, I would say, Philip Fulmer in the 2000s. You've got some proven wins there. You're pushing a lot in the table, Caleb.
Let me go the reverse. Dave, I don't know if you know this. You know, this was Rick Barnes' 5th NCAA tournament. You want to know how many times he's lost to a lower seed in the tournament in his 5 trips to the tournament with Tennessee?
I would say 5.
5. All 5 times. He's never beaten a higher seed, and every single time he's lost to a lower seed. Look, I'm going to go here, and I'm not saying they're on the same level. And this is going to be almost blasphemous to people like you who covered him. The only person that puts Rick Barnes on that Rick Barnes is on the level of in Tennessee history is Jerry Green. Jerry Green is the only person to always lose to a lower seed in the NCAA tournament.
It's funny you bring that up. I was thinking about that. Jerry Green had a lot of wins too. He stacked up a lot of wins. Now, as far as an X's and O's coach, I don't think there's any comparison.
Right.
I think you would agree with that. And by the way, hit the thumbs up button. We love being with you here at night in this instant reaction post-game show as Tennessee falls to FAU in the Sweet 16. Just when it looked like this team was starting to find itself, it did the exact opposite and lost itself completely in the second half, which is incredibly frustrating. And just so many times that Tennessee fans have had the basketball rug pulled from underneath their feet. So, but if you were to even consider making a change, one of the things that I think would work to your benefit from the fan base and the donor perspective is say, hey, gave this guy a shot. He was no longer wanted in Texas, and he almost left to UCLA. I think if you spin it that way behind closed doors, because he took a hard look at UCLA. And this is not a Tennessee guy, so to speak. I'm not anywhere close to that. And you can be, and a lot of the people on the message boards are as well. But here's defense of Rick Barnes. Rick Barnes didn't. Oh, they're going so fast, having trouble keeping up. Rick Barnes didn't shoot 30%. Also, Chris saying the 24 run killed us and can't seem to call a timeout until we're down double digits. I don't understand.
On Rick Barnes. That's on him.
I agree. No, I agree. You're absolutely right. And it is on Rick Barnes. I just, you have an awful lot to offer if you decide to go that route. I could make an argument for both. But again, what type of coach would you get? Would you try to get someone that's a bona fide success? I'd tell you the guy who I would have called before St. John's would have been Rick Pitino, but everybody's going to think I'm insane.
So I don't know who you get, but I also know that Danny White has proven me wrong already because Josh Heupel was not on my radar when I was covering Tennessee football coaching search, and I've talked to a few people from other schools, from Buffalo and UCF specifically. Just so people know, I have a neighbor where I am who's from Buffalo, and who basically tells me, he's like, Danny White's a genius. He finds the best coaches you could ever ask for. He hired like 5 coaches at Buffalo, most notably Felicia Legend-Jack, who is now at Syracuse in women's basketball. And I think one of the things people forget about Danny White is that if this were Philip Fulmer, and I was team keep Rick Barnes no matter what when Fulmer was there and Barnes was offered by UCLA. I was really big on that. Mainly because, I have to be honest, Dave, I didn't have faith in Fulmer to find a great coach. I know that's a really weird thing to say, but like...
No, and I would have, and if you would have said Philip Fulmer couldn't beat down the Spurrier surge in the 90s, if you were saying he can't beat Spurrier, maybe you need to make a change, then at least with Doug Dickey, you would have said, well, he's tied into football circles. With Danny White, he seems to be tied into a lot of circles, but with Philip Fulmer, I doubt very seriously he was tied into any circles other than football. I think you and I would agree on that. Let's go to the message boards real quick. A couple of thoughts. A young recruiter. Okay, well, they did try that with a guy named Wade Houston. His son was in the stands. That didn't work out really well. But it could work out. A former player, if you want to go the Jerry Stackhouse route or the Anthony Hardaway, that's a possibility. But wouldn't you like to see Danny White, if he has to, maybe make another hire or two and prove to us that Josh Heupel wasn't the flash in the pan? And that wasn't a lucky one. This is the second biggest hire in your athletic department.
Yeah. I'm going to go here. Put aside the academic issues. A guy from an X's and O's perspective of Donnie Tyndall's caliber, I think you could get.
And you're really high on Donnie Tyndall. You've said that before.
X's and O's alone, not anything else.
Is his show cause up?
His show calls will be up in 2025. I'm not saying hire Donnie Tyndall. You can't hire him back at Tennessee anymore.
I didn't think so. Okay.
Yes. But so Donnie Tyndall's a big believer in the high-low motion offense. And a lot of basketball people don't believe in high-low motion offense because they say, oh, Bill Self has underachieved in the NCAA tournament. He's got 2 national titles. We talked about this with Josh Ward today, Dave. You know how hard it is to get multiple national titles in college basketball with the way the NCAA tournament is set up?
I really still can't believe that same group of Florida did it twice, to be honest with you. It's incredibly difficult. A lot of people in message boards seem to be behind him. Mr. Jones says tough decisions have to be made in order to be great. Travis says, would few leave Gonzaga? Here's the issue you have to take into account if we're going to talk about Barnes and possibly making a change there. Tennessee is not nearly as elite of a basketball job as it is a football job. You walk into the front door of any football coach, I don't care where he is, other than, maybe Ohio State, Alabama, whatever. You can walk in and make an offer and have an opportunity, other than the top 10 or 15 schools. It's probably a lot larger than that, if not double. Gonzaga can spend the same type of money that Tennessee does in basketball and have a more successful program. I don't know how many programs you could walk into out of roughly 300 and say, I'm hiring you away. I don't know that Tennessee has that pool in basketball. And they're not going to have that in basketball communities if they run off a guy like Rick Barnes, who is beloved in the basketball community.
Yeah, that's the big point, is that on paper they probably could pick from their litter of 300 schools. But the problem is, if they run off Rick Barnes, then a lot of coaches are going to take a second look and be like, I don't know if I want that job.
Right.
And
No, you're absolutely right. And I thought the Tennessee football job had that stench for a while, where they're not going to stick with you. They've got organizational problems.
You covered the coaching search after Lane Kiffin to Derek Dooley. Nobody wanted that job.
No, nobody. Okay, here is one that makes a lot of sense. Elias brought up Steve Forbes, who is at Wake right now, right? Steve.
Yes, he's at Wake. He was at ETSU, I think.
ETSU.
Yeah.
Now, but okay, I think he's a very good coach. I will tell you this, though. You are getting a defensive-minded coach all over again. So don't expect to be running the floor and score 90 or 100 points. I mean, he was the defensive coach on the staff when he was at Tennessee. General Nealon says any coach that won't give up that many offensive boards without throwing a chair. That is something else. Do you remember the Philip Fulmer clap?
Oh my gosh. My dad is a old school football fan, was a football fan before it was popular, before the famous 1960s Giants championship game that got famous.
Yeah.
He says the most grating thing to him ever. If you ask my dad to this day, the thing that upset him to this day was Philip Fulmer clapping on every negative thing.
See, my theory has always been that the Philip Fulmer clap was just, it happened when negative things happened, so you associated it with negative things. I think Rick Barnes not showing emotion rubs a lot of people the wrong way, like it's a Philip Fulmer clap. Like it's an unintentional Philip Fulmer clap. He just doesn't, he's not that guy. He's an older guy. He's not going to jump up and down the sidelines and throw a chair and all that stuff. But
there's also the fact that this is rubbed people the wrong way for years, by the way. I don't know if you ever noticed Rick Barnes in press conferences. It's not that he throws his players under the bus. He doesn't. But he points out all the things his players did wrong, and he absolves himself of blame. And I think Rick Barnes does that because he expects it to be like, okay, it's understood I did wrong, if that makes sense. But
right, he skips the part where it's all my responsibility and it's all my fault. But this guy did this. He skips that first part, is what I've noticed. And then we had this, by the way. SEC football said, do you think Rick Barnes is on the hot seat, or are we overreacting? I think we're overreacting to some extent. I don't think he's really on the hot seat at all. They just made the Sweet 16. So I think that's
by default. I'm going to say that.
Well, but they beat Duke. I mean, come on. And by the way, just got a text message. Barnes 1 year removed from an SEC regular season and tourney title first since 79 in this season's. While Vols struggled down the stretch, Vols made it to the Sweet 16. Replace Barnes, no way at this point. I agree. I'm not anywhere close to that. But I am to the point where you need to be real honest with yourself if you're a basketball fan, a Tennessee basketball fan, and say to yourself that there might not be a national championship ring in Tennessee's future as long as Rick Barnes is the basketball coach. And there might not even be a Final Four berth. If you're willing for that to be it, and you go to Orlando and you go to New York City and all this is cool, and you make runs and it gets kind of serious at times, that's fine. But I will say this, I don't think Tennessee's fan base would tolerate that in football.
No, they won't. They'll take it in basketball.
If Josh Heupel won 10 games for the next 4 years, but couldn't get past that, couldn't get to Atlanta, people would be calling for a change.
Oh, absolutely. And for the record, they'd be right to call for the change. I think, Dave, you and I have talked about this in the past. I think a lot of national media, and this is one of my frustrations, a lot of national media looks at Tennessee firing Fulmer, and they look at everything that happened after that, and they say, see, this is why they shouldn't have fired Fulmer. No, the mistake wasn't firing Fulmer. The mistake was every move they made after firing Fulmer. and it was a series of errors.
Well, I would actually argue that the Lane Kiffin hire was fairly solid. You just should have had a large buyout on his side where he couldn't up and leave after a year. That was silly.
Yeah.
$700,000 buyout. That's like $20 to you and me. So someone else, so it's a little bit split, to be real honest with you. Somebody saying Danny White wants to be great. Barnes isn't the coach to get us there. Could you imagine if we could shoot? I mean, that is true. I mean, if they could just find one dude, I mean, one natural scorer, how different would they be? And then El Nino said, I'll take 10 wins in football for the next 6 years. If I could guarantee you, El Nino, 10 wins in football for the next 6 years, but no SEC championship game, you'd be about halfway through that and say, I take it back. Exactly.
By year 3, he's gonna be over it, or she, whoever you are, you're gonna be over it.
Yeah, never said that. All right, so tomorrow in the program we'll be joined by Fred White, former Vol. We love that Football Friday with Fred. We'll have more reaction.
Speaking of actual champions,
yes, he will join us from the '98 team. We'll have more reaction from Tennessee, and just you thought at halftime they were going to win this thing. You thought that this would be an overachieving year, and to a large extent it was, but just wasn't completely
but this
ready.
does not prove what me and you worried about, Dave. We all saw these long stretches of offensive droughts with Rick Barnes.
Oh no, definitely.
And that happened tonight. They were up, and then they had this long drought, and they never recovered. That's what they've been.
Yeah, I mean, that was how you would draw it up before the tournament started. It was how they would lose. A long non-scoring streak in the second half. And it could have happened against Duke, for goodness sake, but Duke couldn't score, and their bench wasn't deep enough. So, yeah, I mean, this is how you drew it up. You could draw this up, and as soon as the Kai Ziegler was hurt, this is how it was going to end.
Exactly. And everybody can whine all day about the rest call and take-attack fouls. They did. But if you are any type of championship team, you can adjust to that and have a half-court offense that actually scores, and Tennessee didn't. So it has nothing. I don't know how you feel about this, Dave. Yes, they were a little tighter tonight. That's not why Tennessee lost.
No, it's not why Tennessee lost. I actually thought they came out loose, and I thought you said something this morning that they had been challenged through the media, and I thought that was insightful. So an FAU team that could maybe slip up on you. I thought the media and the narrative of Tennessee was too physical for college basketball. I thought that, to be real honest with you, that got their attention, and that's why they played well early, but it didn't continue. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. We'll see you each and every weekday at 10 a.m. as we stream live. Look forward to that. More coverage of the Vols. Go to offthehooksports.com. If you haven't got the app yet, do it. Be sure and subscribe. Hit that thumbs up like button. We appreciate it. Rick Barnes, to leave us with this, Williams says, is 48% in NCAA games. He needs to retire. Ouch. This has been a presentation of Off the